This is the best boss killing weapon in Once Human mobile and PC currently. Hi, I'm Mon, and in this guide we will dive into how to properly build the Fast Gunner SMG Primal Rage. And so, let's get right into it, starting with its weapon features to understand how the gun works. So starting with its first feature, 35% chance of gaining a stack of Fast Gunner effect on hit. Now, what is Fast Gunner? Fast Gunner is a continuous buff granting 1% fire rate and 1% attack for 2 seconds, stacking up to 5 times by default. Then, back to its weapon features, when the magazine has 1 bullet left, 1% of max HP and spare ammo can be consumed to keep firing, and while doing so, HP cannot drop below 1. So this is the special mechanic of this weapon. It doesn't have to reload anymore, but at the cost of consuming your own HP. Then, each hit reloads HP equal to 0.1% times current Fast Gunner stacks. Okay, so this feature exists just so that you don't consume all your HP in 1 second. And lastly, every 1% HP change grants 1% weapon damage boost, stacking up to 80%, lasting for 5 seconds. Each stack duration is independent. So this is pretty much the weapon features big buff. And now here, this obviously is triggered by the own weapon's HP consumption, but it can also be triggered, by the way, from other sources, such as using an activator and stuff like that. Now pretty much with that last feature, what this means is that this weapon becomes stronger the more consistently you hit targets, and weaker if you don't. So that's the rundown on the weapon features. Now this weapon will be a fully physical weapon, meaning it will scale off of attack percent as it relies on bullet damage, which also means that armor stars won't affect this weapon's damage, but the weapon's blueprint will. So if you want to deal more damage with this gun, it's going to be very important to upgrade its weapon blueprint. The more stars you have, the better. Moving over to the calibration that you're going to want to run, that would be Assault Style. Assault Style calibration gives 20% attack, which is a massive buff that is permanently abused since this weapon doesn't need to reload anymore. This means that its negative effect, the minus 25% magazine capacity, doesn't affect this weapon at all. Then, as calibration substats, you're going to want to go with double crit rate, as this weapon is a crit style weapon, and crit rate is a rare stat to get. Moving over to your accessories, starting with the muzzle, I'm using the tactical suppressor for the range bonus. And then for the optic, I'm currently using the compact reflex sight, but you can definitely run the tactical rifle scope if you want more range and you are not afraid of losing stability. Then for the tactics, I'm using the tactical laser sight for even more accuracy. And for the magazine, the best choice is the amended SMG mag for its increased accuracy. Now for the ammo, for some content, suppression SMG ammo will be better, and for some content, precision ammo is better. Now I know I've been saying this for a while now, that I will make a separate video for the best ammo type to use. I promise it's gonna come out, but for now, just generally, you can stick with precision SMG ammo. It'll do you good for any type of content that you clear. Now you might also think that illusion ammo could be better than precision, but really the 10.5% attack buff just isn't enough to beat the 25% weapon damage bonus. Moving on to deviation, you have two options, the first one being the Zap Cam, which is obtained from the Servitor dungeon in the Way of Winter server, and you have the Lone Wolf, which the normal version is obtained from the Monolith of Thirst. Now both deviations will increase weapon damage received by attack targets, but ideally, you should go with the Lone Wolf, and the reason for this is because, first of all, there's a lunar variant, which can only be obtained in lunar servers, and what it'll do is a permanent 5% or 7.5% weapon damage bonus, depending on your sanity, the moment you're synced with it. So this is nice, but the second thing about the Lone Wolf is that it'll also draw aggro, which is very important. And the reason for that is because since you'll be using the Primal Rage, you're going to be pretty squishy. Now for your secondary options, you've got 3, which are all bullseye options. You've got the bingo, the wildfire, and the crossbow, and the reason for this is because they give the bullseye effect, which is vulnerability plus 8%. Now starting with the recurve crossbow, you'll inflict bullseye with it, and it'll also give a 15% crit rate as long as you hit a weak spot. So this is the best option if you're only going to mark once. So if you're going to mark multiple times, then you'll find better results with a bingo. Now the bingo can give up to 45% weak spot damage bonus, which is a lot as well. And on top of that, it'll give you 15% attack if you kill an enemy prior. So bingo and crossbow will be your best options depending on the type of enemies you're facing and how many times you want to mark. But lastly, of course, if the enemy doesn't have weak spots, then you can definitely use wildfire for the 25% weapon damage bonus. Now, I know the last feature says when hitting a weak spot of marked enemies, attack plus 3% for 10 seconds, up to 3 stacks. Unfortunately, this feature does not carry over if you swap back to Primal Rage. Now, for the melee weapon, you're going to want to use the Kukri. It is unfortunately only a droppable weapon from clearing dungeons and from the Primal loot. Now, the reason why we're using the Kukri is for its massive buff, which is defeating a target grants all weapons attack plus 30%, which is very important for the Primal Rage, and critical rate plus 15%, which is very good as well. Now here, to get all this buff, you do have to defeat a target, but here, instead of killing an actual enemy, what you will want to do is rely on this deviation, which is the ice pot. You can get this in the WoW scenario, or you can also simply just trade it with another player, but essentially, this deviation will craft you sticky ice crystals, and with those sticky ice crystals, let's say I just throw one here, actually I threw two, but I spawned two here. Essentially, if I just defeat it with the Kukri, you'll see here from the buff list that I got attack plus 30% and crit rate plus 15%. And if I swap weapons, I still keep that buff. Now, there's also a specific trick with the Kukri, but you will also be able to combine it with the long axe. Now, the only actual content where you'll actually do this trick would be in Leia against Dr. Mannheim. And the reason for this is because you can prep 3 ice cubes before he starts aggroing on you. So you use the long axe, you do a heavy attack to hit all 3 cubes to give you the 24% crit rate that the long axe can give. And then right after doing that, you swap out the long axe for the Kukri, then you destroy 1 ice cube, and now you're ready to DPS Mannheim, which is how you're able to kill Mannheim before he even goes invulnerable. Moving over to key gear, you have 2 options, the first one being Oasis Mask, which is Fast Gunner max stacks plus 10, and attack plus 1% per Fast Gunner stack. And the second option would be Charmed Mag Top, which is when the player is in Fast Gunner status, the less ammo or magazine capacity they have, the higher their chance of triggering an extra bullet when firing. At 1% ammo, the chance of triggering an extra bullet is 40%, which is really good. So with the Charmed Mag Top, you will deal much more damage, but it's going to drain your HP, whereas with the Oasis Mask, you will deal less damage than with the Charmed Mag Top, but you will gain more survivability. So as you can see in this comparison, the Charmed Mag Top outperforms the Oasis Mask in terms of damage by a lot. However, with the Oasis Mask, you will sit at a higher HP percentage. Now, before I talk about the gear sets, if you're learning something new or wish to see more Once Human content, then make sure to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and turn on the bell for notifications. And with that, we continue forward to the gear sets. So moving over to the gear sets, your first best option will be 3-piece Treacherous with 2-piece Lone Wolf. The Lone Wolf pieces will give you 5% crit rate, which is pretty important, whereas Treacherous will give a permanent 50% weapon damage bonus. Now, the way to force Treacherous to always give you 50% weapon damage bonus, since here it says the bonus further increases as your sanity drops, well, the way to do this is by lowering your sanity manually so that it doesn't automatically go back up. And that can be achieved by consuming either spoiled food, which reduces your sanity by 200 points per, or seaweed, which reduces your sanity by 100, cactus, which is minus 100 as well, or oranges, which is minus 100, though I don't have them on me right now. But you get the point. Now, I would recommend using spoiled food since it's just a faster way to reduce it, though that can induce gastric discomfort, which is a debuff that will sometimes cause you to vomit and will continuously reduce your weight. So if you do end up using spoiled food, then make sure to craft some antibiotics to heal your gastric discomfort effect. Now, there is a caveat to this combo, which is during Lunar Oracle, this set loses its damage advantage because you automatically restore sanity when killing enemies during Lunar Oracle, which is bad because restoring sanity means you lose your damage bonuses. So in that case, you would actually want to run 3-piece Lone Wolf, which now the 3-piece bonus effect from Lone Wolf will give you up to 48% crit damage bonus. And as for the 2-piece, you will want to use Treacherous Tides for the 12% weapon damage bonus when your HP is below 70%. Now, if you have a keen eye or if you've just read the description, you might notice that 3-piece Lone Wolf with 2-piece Treacherous Tides actually gives more bonuses than 3-piece Treacherous Tides with 2-piece Lone Wolf. Now, the reason why the 3-piece Lone Wolf doesn't beat the 3-piece Treacherous combo is simply due to the fact that Lone Wolf requires you to stack up its 3-piece effect, whereas Treacherous is permanent. And that simple fact makes Lone Wolf deal a bit less damage. Then lastly, as the third option, you can definitively use 4-piece Treacherous for the extra shield it gives every 8 seconds to help you survive, since you'll pretty much often be low HP with the Primal Rage. Then, as for the One Piece, you should pick Heavy Duty to give you 10% HP, which, spoiler alert, will help your Cradle perk give you a bigger shield. However, this is the combo with the least amount of damage bonuses. Now lastly, for the hide that you'll want to use for your mask, you would want to prioritize using Lunar Wolf Skin because this is weak spot damage plus 4%, and if your HP is below 30%, which is like always the case, this effect plus 8%. Though if you cannot craft Lunar Wolf Skin, then you should go with the Golden Wool, which is weapon damage and status damage plus 12% in total between them, with the proportion changing every second. So if you can't craft it with the Lunar Wolf's hide, or if the enemy doesn't have weak spots, then you should use Golden Wool. Moving on to Cradle, I'm currently in a Lunar server, so I'll go over those. You're going to want Anti-Phase for the SMG damage bonus and for the damage bonus against phase anomalies. Then you'll want Resilience and Chaotic Thoughts for the damage reduction and damage bonus against all type of enemies. Now I know the description only says it's against Deviants, but I'll demonstrate how that's wrong in a bit. Then you'll want Deviant Energy Defense for the important shield to help you survive, Steady Hand for the Fast Gunner buffs, so weapon damage bonus and weak spot damage bonus. Then you'll want Marked Strike for the weak spot damage bonus against marked enemies, Fast Pursuit for the attack, crit rate, and crit damage buffs. Then lastly, you'll want Bounty Hunter. Now I know in the middle of the description it says effect is removed after switching weapons, but that only counts for the attack buff. The weapon damage buff written after will stay with you even after swapping weapons. Now to show you that these two perks are actually against any type of enemy, here I am sitting at, well, I actually have like just no HP, but I have a whim due to low sanity, and if I take a look at my stat sheet, you'll see that in my damage bonuses, I have damage bonuses against any type of enemy in the game. As for my damage reduction, I have 40% damage reduction against any type of enemy in the game, though 40%, if you're confused why, this is because Chaotic Thoughts gives me 10, and Resilience gives me 30. Moving on to the food buffs, starting with the food slot, you're going to want to eat Mixed Fried Hot Dog as it's 20% damage bonus against marked enemies, which counts as X-type damage bonus, which is very strong since it's a multiplier that you don't have a lot of. Then as for the drink slot, there isn't anything that specifically buffs this weapon's damage, so just go with any movement drink of your choice such as Stardust Mushroom Soup. Of course, you can also eat Stardust Raspberry Shaved Ice to increase your continuous debuff effect duration. Moving over to the substats priority, starting with the weapon mod and the mask mod, you will want to use the keyword suffix, here being Fast Gunner Suffix. And as linked attribute, you will want to look for when in Fast Gunner state, crit damage plus 20%. Though if you are lucky, you could try to get this and the weak spot damage bonus at the same time and only get as general attribute 1 damage bonus against X type, depending on the type of content that you're clearing. Though usually you won't really be that lucky, so you'll only get crit damage bonus as linked attribute and then 2 damage bonuses against X type of enemies. Then for the helmet and top mod, if you can, try to get a lunar mod. So if you're in a lunar server, you can get lunar suffix, and the reason why we will go with this on the helmet and top is because, well, lunar suffix gives way more bonuses than your normal violent suffix. So for instance, here as fixed attribute, you can get 30% crit damage bonus, and here as linked attribute, you can get 12% weapon damage bonus, which you will have no problem reaching, since here, even though it says the lower your HP, the higher your weapon damage bonus, with the Primal Rage, you will pretty much always be low HP, so you don't need to worry about this. Now here, 30% and 12% is a lot. It's actually double the value that Violent gives, which is 15% crit damage and 6% weapon damage bonus. And so for everything other than helmet and top, unless if you can't get lunar suffix, you would want to run a violent suffix mod with linked attribute being weapon damage bonus and with 2 damage bonuses against X type of enemies as your general attributes. Now, before talking about mods to run, I just want to share that if you aren't sure how mods work or how and where to get them, then I've got this mod spreadsheet for you to check out. Every mod in the game is in there, and the link will be in the description and pinned comment. So starting with the Primal Rage mod, the ideal mod to run will be Precision Rush. You get a massive amount of weak spot damage bonus, which is really good. It stacks up to 45%, and it only needs 3 seconds, so you get 15% per second. But this mod would only be good against enemies with weak spots and if you do hit them consistently. So in other cases, you would definitely want to run Shootout, which is 1.5% weapon damage bonus for 10 seconds, stacking up to 20 stacks. So you can get up to 30% weapon damage bonus with Shootout. Now this effect on average will be procced fully after 4 seconds, so it's still really good. It's just going to take 1 more second more than Precision Rush. Now you wouldn't really want to run the other options, so for instance Shooting Blitz, because the main reason to run Shooting Blitz is for its fast gunner duration plus 4 seconds, and the Primal Rage doesn't really have downtime, since you don't need to reload the gun, so that stat is kind of wasted, and it only gives a 15% weapon damage bonus. And lastly, with Cowboy, well, the first few words of the description is after reloading an empty magazine, which you never do with the Primal Rage, so Cowboy is absolutely useless. Moving on to the Bullseye Weapons mod, it's going to be Vulnerability Amplifier that you'll want to run for the extra 8% vulnerability. Then for the Helmet mod, you've got 3 options. You have Momentum Up, then you have Fateful Strike, and lastly you also have Precise Strike. Starting with Fateful Strike, Fateful is the best option when the enemy doesn't have any weak spots. Then if the enemy does have weak spots, and assuming you have a high weak spot hit rate, the choice will be between Momentum Up and Precise Strike. It'll be between which stat you need the most. So if you have a lot of weapon damage bonus but not a lot of weak spot damage bonus, then go with Precise Strike. But if it's the contrary, then you should run Momentum Up. Of course, substats are very important, so watch out for those. Moving on to the Mask mod, the 2 options will be Blitzkrieg, which is fast gunner stacks plus 5, and additional fire rate plus 1% for each stack. And your second option will be Explosive Barrage, which is 1 in fast gunner state, crit rate plus 10%, and weapon damage plus 10%. Now they're both good options, but Blitzkrieg will outperform Explosive Barrage by a slight amount, so if you're doing mod conversions, then go with Blitzkrieg. So as you can see on screen right now, only comparing their main effect, so the core effect, Blitzkrieg is coming out on top. Moving on to the Gloves mod, you have 2 options here being Crit Boost and Crit Amplifier. Now due to the simple fact of not having a lot of crit rate compared to crit damage, we will prioritize Crit Boost. But as always, you might currently not have a good Crit Boost, or simply your Crit Amplifier is better than your Crit Boost, so don't feel bad to switch off Crit Boost to Crit Amp. For the Boots mod, the best mod to use will be Rush Hour. Rush Hour is every 10% HP loss, grants 4% melee, weapon, and status damage bonus. Now this mod caps out at 36%. You cannot reach 40 since that would mean that you're dead. So pretty much with the Primal Rage, you're always going to be sitting at pretty low HP, and this will give the most amount of damage bonuses. Of course, if you don't have a Rush Hour mod, you can always use Covered Advance, which compared to all of the other remaining options, it's either less conditional or gives more buffs. So its description is taking no damage within 4 seconds, which is a really short time, grants 20% melee, weapon, and status damage bonus for 30 seconds, which is a very long time. Then for the top mod, you would preferably pick a defensive mod such as Ardent Shield to help you survive. And if you're not really struggling with survivability, then of course you can use any other gold mod that is of Lunar Suffix with the best possible substats. Lastly, for the Pants mod, you have 2 options. You have Deadshot, and you also have Bullet Siphon. Now the best option will be Deadshot. It gives a lot of crit damage bonus. As you can see in its description, it stacks up to 45%. However, if you don't have a good Deadshot mod and have much better substats on a Bullet Siphon, then don't feel bad to use Bullet Siphon. Since Bullet Siphon is up to 25% weapon damage bonus, since its description is weapon damage plus 5%, okay, then every 5 bullets consumed in the magazine grants 4% up to 20%. So that comes out at 25, and here This mod simply does not need to be stacked unless if like you start shooting an enemy with more than just 1 bullet in your mag, because this mod looks at the total amount of bullets already consumed in your magazine. Just make sure that if you run Bullet Siphon, that you have at least 26 bullets in your mag so you can fully benefit from the core effect. But this is it for this guide. If you learned something and wish to see more Once Human content, then make sure to have liked this video, subscribe to my channel, and turn on the bell for any notifications. Feel free to ask your questions down in the comments below. This is Mon. Peace out.